Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers live on YouTube. This is your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel of awesome growers here with me today, as well as Matthew Gates, our IPM specialist. Matthew, why don't you go ahead first and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey Jack. I'm Matthew Gates. I'm an integrated pest management specialist, and if you're interested in getting rid of pests or keeping them from being a problem, you can find most of my content about that on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol. You can also find me on Instagram at SyncAngel and on Twitter at SyncAngel, and a bunch of other podcasts too recently, which I've been enjoying.
I always love seeing you and others branch out. I think some people might be confused and think we'd be worried about like some competitive nature or something like that, or think that you're going to go and jump onto the other platform. I think we're always just stoked to see everybody branching out, meeting new followings, and growing their own following, and getting to make friends with other shows. I think it's a great thing for the community and you personally. I think the chat will actually benefit as well. Doesn't look like we have everybody in the chat. This was happening to Eagle the other night too. I'm not sure why that's going on. So hopefully, I saw when he wrote a message, it started letting other people write messages. So hopefully, I'll write hey in the chat from Cheap Home Grow, and hopefully that'll kick it off. Hello everyone, Real Red Hairs. Bam, there it goes. People started chatting right after I did. So that's weird. But next up, my buddy Spartan Grown. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, trying to get my audio working. It looks like it's working. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram, all one word is Spartan Grown. Or if you don't do social media, you can hit me up on Gmail, just the email, spartangrown@gmail.com. I'm a regular organic grower here in Michigan. At home and at work, I'm a synthetic grower with cocoa.
Cheers to that, and cheers to you for giving me your reamendment recipe. The last two grows I've done with the M3 soil, I used your reamendment mix that you sent over to me. Anybody who wants it, I wrote it out by hand and took a picture and favorited it so I could send it to other people if they want to use the Michigan-made mix. I used it now in my earth box as well, and the plants are loving it. They're about day 11 to flower, looking super healthy and happy and praying away. But speaking of healthy, happy plants, Dr. MJ grows a bunch of those as well. Dr. MJ, how you doing?
Hey, Jack. Yeah, I'm doing good. Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. Growing my little plants in the New Year's Grow Challenge. I'm about to start my one cola plant. I'm going to wait right until the end of the month to drop that and flip it on the February 14th. Yeah, and I haven't been able to be in the last couple of shows really much, so I'm happy to be back and excited for the show.
Happy to have you back, as always. It's definitely adds some credibility to have a PhD on the panel. Although it might not have sounded like it a few weeks ago when I sort of knocked education a little bit when asked a certain question, do highly respect education. And I think that anybody who's dedicated the time to get a PhD has a lot of knowledge in their field and is a professional, most likely. If not, then they probably did something a little bit wrong along the way and at least probably learned a bunch. So there's that, definitely. So cheers to education. And like I said, having you and your knowledge on this panel, I think adds a lot of credibility for a lot of people out there. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming as always. Next up, we have
Absolutely,
Kyle,
Jack.
Predicative Breeding. How you doing, Kyle?
Good. Thanks for having me, Jack. Yeah, if anyone wants to, I'm a cannabis breeder. I specialize in feminized seeds. If anybody's looking for feminized seeds, I do have a website. It's the letter P followed by breeding.com. If you want to look at anything I've been kind of getting into and some of the stuff I've been harvesting, you can check out on all social media platforms. My name is Predicative Breeding. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and excited to see what we have to talk about tonight.
Always excited to be here with all of you. And last and certainly not least, hopefully we have some late joiners with us as well. But if not, I'm always happy to have a short panel. It gives everybody a little bit more chance to talk. The American one, how you doing over there?
Hey, Jack and panel and everyone in chat. I'm the American one and on YouTube, and the American one _with_Keens on the IG if you want to see some of my grows. Yeah, I love cannabis and talking about it, so I'm glad to be here tonight.
No worries. Happy to have you. I just said no worries because I read a message from our little group chat saying that I think Noah and Brandon will not be making it tonight, but that's all good. It's and I think Aaron the Grower as well will not be joining us. I think they're getting a little bit of family time this evening, and so cheers to that and spending time with family. Definitely, hopefully, a lot of people have gotten more time to do that over this past year or so. But if not, if you've been separated, hopefully you can enjoy that time together. But we are back for another week to talk about cannabis growing, how to do it cheaply at home, as we always do. And I don't know, I was curious if anybody has any thoughts or directions. I didn't have any topics planned out for tonight. So usually we do sort of a Q&A with the chat, where anybody from the chat make sure to tag at Cheap Home Grow and or at Jack Greenstock. So it'll light up red on my end, unless you want to tag one of the specific panel members. I think all of us has YouTube, and most of us are going to be looking at it at least somewhat throughout the night, especially if we get tagged. So we can either answer you back in the chat, or we can actually answer it and go into a little bit of a conversation on the show. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. And the American one, it looked like you had something that you might have wanted to say to get us started off here.
Well, I had a question about a post that Matthew Gates made concerning the disease-resistant rice and how it's associated with an indigenous seed endophyte that acquires resistance somehow. I was wondering why couldn't they just add that bacteria to all rice? If he could elaborate on that whole post and my question as well, that would be cool.
Do you remember a little bit more detail? I've talked about a couple.
Yeah. Or they.
Well, that would be the
rice.
rice genus. Let me just go through. So it's Instagram, right? Let me just go to my recent ones here. Oh, yeah. Okay, I see it. From Zhejiang province.
Yes, that's the one I'm looking at.
So okay. Because sometimes I forget the details, and I just want to make sure I have sort of everything here. So the rice. So what they did was so your question is, could this be used for other rice? Well, possibly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible. We'd have to know more about the species, and I certainly don't know every species out there, and all the different isolates that could be possible.
Right. Well, I guess my question is, they studied a whole bunch of different kinds of rice, and this one in particular had that association, right?
I believe so, or at the very least, they were looking at. I'm just looking at the description here to see if this answers the question.
Okay.
Yeah, it was only one particular species. There's tons of different cultivars though that would have
varying acceptance of the bacteria. You might not be able to form a relationship with some of them. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
But for those who are curious, since we're talking about it, the research report is called Bacterial Seed Endophyte Shapes Disease Resistance in Rice, which is a pretty self-explanatory title. And the description here, just very quickly, is that a high occurrence of Spingomonas, particularly Spingomonas melonis, like melon, IS. That's how it's spelled for those who want to type it out. It was accumulated and transmitted across generations in disease-resistant rice seeds, and it confers resistance to disease-susceptible phenotypes by producing anthranilic acid, and it interferes with a seed-borne pathogen's RPOS, which is a gene, and that seed pathogen is Burkholderia plantarii. So this microbe is responsible for producing a compound that is allelopathic, which is negative for the recipient, in this case, the pathogen that would infect the rice. So it's a cool little symbiosis, particularly a mutualism.
So we had a question about, it said from Weedist 207, they asked at Jack Greenstock, twisted top leaves, not light related. I answered in the chat and I said that it could be pH issues or pest related. And I think maybe russet mites cause the curling and twisted messed up top new leaf, but oftentimes it's pH calibration being messed up. But I'd like to hear Matthew and maybe the rest of the panel's thoughts.
There's tons of things that can cause like weird leaf deformations, and the vernacular is not enough. I would want to see a photo, and even then you can't always delineate different causes.
Yeah, like even
But
the beet curly top that you mentioned last week or somewhere else recently. But that one, it causes like the witch's broom or whatever they call it, where it
the hemp
completely,
phytoplasma,
yeah, they
yeah.
fold up over top of each other on the top, and that's really like twisted. So I think I agree with you. Would like to see pictures or at least a much greater description. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I love that Spartan Grown likes to send me videos because he gets so much over to me with his tester updates, and I always love getting those updates. So pictures
I mean,
and videos are
videos
definitely helpful.
videos are moving pictures, right? So that's a lot of words.
Lots of words, that's for sure. We have another one from Sour, or does anybody else have thoughts on that? The American one, Dr. MJ Kyle, Spartan.
I agree with what was said already, but if it's only at the very, very tippy leaves, that I have never had the russets or anything like that. But if it's more like as it goes down with the bigger fan leaves and they're curled, I think that's more indicative of a pH thing. You know, where the bigger fan leaves are got that rift, and sometimes it's hereditary too. You know, I think one of the reasons they call the alien rift because the leaves had that rift in them. But I've seen it with the pH. So sorry.
I definitely agree with that. I just want to also chime in that for those who might think that they have that problem, I have a video on my YouTube channel for broad mites and also for russet mites, and what the damage, that sort of crinkling, gnarling damage looks like, so that you can compare it to what you see in your crop. And russet mite and broad mite look pretty similar because it's both like a phytotoxic saliva. But yeah, it might be more of a twist and less of like a crinkle, if you know what I mean. And those are kind of overlapping definitions, I think. So
I
it
have an
really
easy
helps
one.
have
I needed a
reference.
graphic for twist versus crinkle.
Yeah, right.
Matthew, I got a
This
easy
is
one.
sort of, I just want to chime in for my 2 cents is that it's damn hard to get a good diagnosis when you're looking at pictures. It can be hard when you're looking at the plant. Looking at pictures, I can't tell you how many times I've been chatting with somebody in our chat room and like they're talking about their crinkled leaves and I'm thinking it's like a CalMag issue or maybe a pH or something else like this. And then finally they send a picture and it's like nothing.
Right. I've seen that too.
And all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, everything that we've been talking about is probably not true in this case. Your plant looks fine. You're like a brand new grower and you're a helicopter gardener, which is cool, right? But like you're just over obsessing about like a little nothingness. So I just, it's tough. And I always try to look for the most likely culprits whenever you have any kind of plant issue. You try to think about what could you have possibly done wrong recently, like for a pH issue or something like that, or maybe they haven't been getting watered appropriately or some other issue in sort of garden management. If there's an insect or some sort of other pathogen, then you try to think about what's the most likely is almost a better route into a diagnosis than paying too close of attention to the symptoms.
Agreed. It's gotten to the point with predatory mites and rice root aphids looking very similar to people, and fungus gnats as well in that group, that like when people say when people presume that they're dealing with a rice root aphid, I say, can you show me a picture? And sometimes, more often than I would have hoped, it is like just a predatory mite or a springtail or something, or a fungus gnat. Or I make sure to send one of my videos showing like, here's a reference. Does it look like this? Because you might be panicking over nothing, like you just said.
Yeah. And sometimes
I have an example of
people
panicking.
really have a big problem and really sort of are describing it accurately or even under describing it. I mean, sometimes, people say I got twisted leaves and they finally send in the picture and like the plant itself looks like it's about to be like, eaten from the inside. So
yeah, it like implodes.
Yeah, it goes both ways and yeah.
Speaking about panicking from nothing, Noah 42710 Dabber asks at Cheap Home Grow, do springtails affect plants negatively? And I would say that's one thing that I know I've gotten questions about a lot. Matthew, I think you said that's one of the most common questions you get as an IPM expert. And I'd say no, that they don't negatively impact the plant. I've seen them at extremely high levels, and people claim that they can get to levels high enough that can be damaging, but I've seen them in like some of the living soil beds in crazy, crazy high populations, and the plants are still healthy and happy. So I'm curious if Matthew has any more thoughts on that or if anybody else does.
That's essentially my opinion too. Like the vast majority of springtails are detrivorous anyways, so they're not really going to be interested in plant material that's not problematic. And they're so like they might like at the very least they might appear to be like that if you have a plant that's got suffering from a primary problem already, like a decay or some sort of fungal disease that's pretty visible. But yeah, in my experience, I've never had people have problems with springtails. And I'm sure there might be, because of how diverse they are, I do believe there are some herbivorous species that exist out there, but I don't know any springtail pests off the top of my head. Um, yeah. And they can be colorful too. So sometimes people only associate them with like a whitish, grayish, or blackish color, but some of them are like orange or have like a stripe or something. So you got to watch out.
Yeah, I'd say that's one of those when you see something alive, especially if you're one of those people that came from either cocoa or hydro or some sort of sterile growing environment, when you see any bug, you're trained to freak out. It's like, I need to kill it, get rid of it as soon as possible. But when you're in like a soil or especially living soil situation, springtails are something that I think you have to like learn to identify and not be too worried about. So
I definitely respect the reaction though, the reflex of like, this is a problem, I need to fix it. But you're
yeah,
right.
like why identify why it's happening. Is there like giant wet pockets, or is your soil not getting like enough aeration or something that's causing certain things to be happening?
Mm-hmm.
We have another question from Grow IG22. It says at Cheap Home Grow, any of you make bubble hash looking to start simple, cheap, simple setup, running an ounce or two at a time, or maybe my trim? Any suggestions on how to get started? I have done a lot of bubble hash in the past, and I have a few different suggestions. One, there's a video of Subcool making bubble hash with like 1 gallon bags and like a little mini, almost like those garbage cans you get for your bathroom that are really short. And he uses like a wooden spoon and just stirs it up with ice in the sink. And then he pours it through the bubble bags and separates it out. If you want to go up like maybe a scale up from that, you can get a really cheap washing machine for like $50 roughly. And look up Frenchy cannoli bubble hash on YouTube, and just like the American one I said in the past, you just watch the video start to finish. There's a new one where he has literally translated or subtitles because he has a really thick French accent. But the first one I watched, like some of it's subtitled, but most of it's not. But if you can understand him and just follow the steps and watch what he does and do what he does, you'll end up with really crazy good fire bubble hash. And the one thing I'll say is I'd go for the full mesh bags. Even the cheapo sets are pretty good. I wouldn't spend a few $100 on like a name brand. So that's one piece of advice I'd give, because there's lots of like several $100 bags out there. The Amazon cheapy sets will probably do you just fine. Curious, the American one, do you have any thoughts on bubble hash?
Yeah. I guess I think I got a 5 gallon washing machine, and I don't know if 1 ounce will be like an appropriate amount to put in there and try and run. I'm not sure. I try to get at least 4, between 4 and 8.
They could just wait a few harvests, I guess,
right,
if they're going up to that scale.
Right, but definitely, you don't have to get stupid expensive bubble bags. The ones I forget, I got them at my local hydro store, and they were relatively cheap and they work awesome. So, but I will say, definitely turn them inside out, rinse them out totally, like first, because there'll be fibers that left over, and just check all the seams to make sure there's no loose thread when you get new bubble bags, because that sucks if you get any in your material. And then but yeah, you could do it simple, like you're saying. Put a 5 gallon bucket with your material into the sink with water, and stir with ice and water, and stir it, and then pour it through the bubble bags. That'll work fine,
There's a thing called Whisk Tech that one of the his name is Schwale, SHWALE, I believe, on Instagram, but he goes Farmhouse something PDX. He uses an actual whisk like you'd use to beat eggs with, and just really gently mixes. The thing that you don't want to fucking do when you make hash is don't beat the shit out of it. Don't beat the fucking hell out of it, because it's going to end up green, tons of contaminated material. No matter how many bags you use and separate it out, you're going to have to either power wash, basically like hose through the contaminant, or just like don't let it mix for such a long time, and don't use crazy amounts of ice, even though the bubble man says to use tons of ice. Spartan Grown, you got your hand up over there.
Yeah, I wanted to say a few things. For one, as far as the bubble hash, I don't have a lot of input on what's already been said, other than the one thing that most beginners don't do right, and this is going to determine. This also going to give them a low yield, or is that they don't put enough pressure of water through the screens. You're really trying to force stuff through the screens, and I see a lot of people just pick up the bag and let the water come through, and that's it. It's like, man, you should be spraying water pressure through that to really see. You're really just doing a sifting process, so don't be afraid to hit it with water.
That cleans it up a lot.
Yeah.
Like Frenchy Cannoli has in his video, you see he has like a hose connected to his. I have like a pressure washer, not a pressure washer, like a pump washer that I'll put ice in the thing to spray through. But yeah, I totally agree with you there, Spartan.
And then the other thing I wanted to say was back to the first question was on the twisting of the leaves. I do agree with the consensus with the panel of it's likely pH. Usually the twisting is due to pH being off in the root zone. I wanted to kind of give them some tips there to check to see if it is pH. And that's one, the first thing you should do is calibrate your pH meter, whatever you're using to pH your water, make sure it's calibrated. If you have two, that would be excellent, because then you could check them against each other. Or have water drops, or another way to check pH. It's always nice to have a way to check to make sure that your meter's even right, because it's easily could get off. The second thing is you can do the pH of the media. So you can take a little bit of your media and run water through it, collect that water, and then try to get a pH of that to try to give you some kind of an idea of what the pH is in the root zone. That's not as good as knowing what, the pH of the water going in. And then the last thing is the thing that wasn't brought up was it's possible. I mean, I can't tell because I haven't seen it, but it's possible that, especially being towards the top of the plant, if you have a fan blowing on it right there, that can cause some weird twisting and leaf weirdness, because it gets too dry for it. You know what I mean? It's windburn or whatever they call it. And that's all I think I had on that.
I had some thoughts going back to the bubble hash. I saw some stuff in the comments. They were saying that just a reminder to do more than one wash. A lot of people might think that, oh, you do one wash and you're done. No, you can rerun that material. Like I do my first wash for 30 seconds to a minute, 30 seconds. Really gentle. That's my first pull. Then my second wash is a minute 30 or 3 minutes. Then I do like 3 minutes again. And then I'll do like a 5-minute wash and a 5-minute wash. But I never go longer than 5 minutes. And we'll go up to like 5, maybe 6 washes if it's still dumping. But usually first 2, 3, maybe 4 runs, you're getting the majority of your material. It's just like when you do that last run to make sure you're not leaving anything on the table, unless you're gonna, like I do now, extract it with a solvent. Like I'll use ethanol, high proof alcohol, like 190 proof. Then I'll soak and shake the bubble hash material that was washed and get any remaining cannabinoids out of there and make some RSO. So there's definitely a lot to it with making hash, but I think that was the one other comment.
Let me add one more thing too, is if they're going to use dry material, they should let it soak for a good 10 minutes.
I'd say like 15 to 30, depending on. Yeah. I think you'll lose some terpenes in the process, but you're going to lose terpenes in the process of the wash anyway. And I think it makes the material get to a state that it's going to release the trichomes a lot more easily, and you're not going to break up the material. It sort of gets softer and spongier, lets the trichs fly, versus like when it's like still rigid, it wants to break up and you're getting a lot more of that plant contamination material. Grow IG22 asks as well, I'm also wondering what are good ways for storing dry sift / bubble hash. Bubble hash for me, small glass jar in the freezer. Frenchie presses his with a hot water bottle, like boiling water for 20 to 30 minutes. He rolls it over top of it and he puts that in a cellophane, and then takes that cellophane and puts that into a glass and throws that in a freezer, and it keeps for years and years. And some people even say that it gets better with time. I'm kind of on the fence about that. I've had some that gets better with time. Some sort of loses its specialness with time. Dry sift, I personally think, stores a little bit better than bubble hash, but if you press the bubble hash into a temple ball, it can store pretty well. But I don't know. I think fresh is often pretty good, but there are some really interesting notes and elements about cured hash, like more potency, more heavy effects, more sleepiness. Frenchie would say soporific. So there's definitely something to aging and storing your hash, or just making sure it doesn't go bad in the keeping process.
Just knowing like the physical makeup of a trichome and how it's like kind of like a plant oil surrounded by fats, lipids, waxes, that kind of thing it's surrounding it. So that tells me is like everything that you can do to not break that waxy lipid layer is probably the best. Is probably going to allow it to store for the longest. So I think dry sift is kind of the most gentle way to not be breaking a bunch of those layers. So if this is just a guess for me, but I would say dry sift has got to be the best because you're not smashing them up.
I feel
Agree.
like that intuitively makes sense to me, unless
It
there's
gets
some
one
sort
bounce.
Of, unless there's something like some special physical chemistry stuff that's going on, which there could be. But like, yeah, I love that you brought that up, Spartan. Like obviously like the physical characteristics, which people take for granted all the time, myself included. But like when you think about it like that, it lets you like kind of come to that conclusion. And I kind of feel the same way.
I've heard stories from Skunkman Sam where people would dab some of, or even like, I think, yeah, they were like hitting it on like a hash screen, not actually dabbing it, but like smoking it and it would melt through the screen. Some of his dry sift that was like 10, 15, 20 years old. And the only thing about it was it would be like bright red on all of the outside, but as soon as you take your tool and scrape through it, it'd be like bright gold underneath. So the oxygen would oxidize the outside of it. And it looked like a red Lebanese almost. And then like you'd scrape into it and then you'd get that sort of like blonde leb, that like golden ash. And I've noticed that even with like my Curador, it blocks out UV. So the three things that degrade trichomes are oxygen, heat, and I believe time. But I could be wrong. I think I might be mixing up the third one. But basically, you want to prevent as much light and oxygen from getting to the trichomes as possible. And so I think that's why the trichomes on the inside of that pile of dry sift stayed golden, where the outside is just getting oxidized by oxygen and turning
This is
more
like
of a
how
red.
like a cheese rind develops, and like you salt the outside of the cheese and even coat it with another microbe sometimes, or
It's
ash
funny,
or whatever.
funny you mentioned that because we're just talking about curing like a few weeks ago, and I just randomly started looking up like curing meats and like meat rooms and like how a larger room, like it's easier to control the humidity in the process and like how quickly they can get their meats to. They have like dry curing too as well. So like their dry curing process involves certain like bacterias and things like that, and it ages the meat a certain way. And like some people like it when it's like 40 days versus like 60 days and all this different stuff. So it's interesting to see another field like food, which has been around like as long or longer, obviously. And they've got these dialed in processes like a lot of us are trying to, or at least going about some sort of way of like when we dry and cure our cannabis, like there's some sort of processes that we're all doing a little bit differently that bring out different flavors and notes. And it's really cool to see what factors play into the flavors and storage of things like meat or even like wines, like how they get better with age and things like that. So there's a lot of thought process of trying to draw some of these things into our industry that we've seen other industries have success with. Because typically something like in agriculture, as soon as you harvest it, its potential value is going to start dropping a lot of the time. Like it's fresh, it's at its freshest. It's like only going to be able to sit on that store shelf for so long before it has to be basically sold or it's spoiled. And so it's cool to see that there are people thinking how to make value products out of long-term storage. After dry sift material, can you still make edibles or RSO? Just blaze? Yes. It's not going to be as potent. Obviously, you're taking at least some majority of the trichomes, but there are trichomes all over the plants, and stitholithic or bulbous. I think that there are terpenes and other things in the stitholithic trichomes that a lot of people underestimate. I personally think flower. I'll always be a flower guy because there's something within the flower, like all of it, the full effect of it. There's something beautiful about it. And when you're dry sifting it, you're just getting the trichome. So you're losing whether it's the fats or the chlorophylls or whatever else, anthocyanin, who knows. There's a whole full spectrum within the plant. And I think that extracting the remaining portions, you're still going to have some medical values for sure. But I'm curious what Spartan has to say, and then maybe somebody else on the panel about that.
I do like using, I wouldn't I'm not a fan of using it in edibles because I'm picky with flavor. Yes, you 100% could put them in edibles, and you can definitely get a medicinal benefit from it in edibles. I just don't like the flavor that comes with stuff. Usually, people just melt hash like that into butter and then go to town with it. But so for me, I prefer to just clean it up with the alcohol extraction, which is RSO, what most people call. So that's where I would tend to go with that. And what I like about that is there's way less material. So I was going to kind of disagree with you when you said that it's going to be less potent, because in my process with the alcohol, I can squeeze more. If I was putting all dry sift into a whatever container, I can fit way more trikes in that way than I could with plant material. So it's going to be a bigger return.
I just meant like it'd be less potent than if you took the flower before it was dry sifted and then extracted it purely for RSO. Than if like you dry sifted it, kept the dry sift over here in a jar, and then made the RSO and then tested both of them side by side, like potency per oil. But I see what you're talking about there with the amount of space that it can take up, dry sift versus flower, etc. I don't know if it was on air or not before the show. I think it was before the show. I was telling you that my wife just made her first batch of RSO out of the already been vaped. Was that offline?
I
Probably.
believe so. It was right
Yes.
before the show. Yep.
Yeah, and she was actually surprised with the potency of it. I think that some was CBN because like I saved up like a big jar of it, and every single bowl that I vape, I dump in there, and it's like a whole bunch of different strains. It's like good flower, and they say that there's 40 to 60% of the cannabinoids and other things remaining in there. Probably not very many terpenes at all because they all volatilize off during the vape process. But she was impressed with the both texture, flavor, and potency of the already been vaped RSO, comparing it to what we've been washing, which has been mostly trim, small buds, and larf. So I was actually excited because I was like, shit, I'd always saved it because she used to make it into butter and I would eat the edibles, but I just haven't been eating the edibles as much lately. And RSO is a little bit cleaner way to get the cannabinoids into your system without the sugar. So we said, let's skip a step in that process and just make the RSO. And it worked out very well. So I'm extremely happy to announce that if anybody has ABV or already been vaped buds, you can definitely do an alcohol extraction and make some pretty killer RSO with, and as Spartan mentioned this before the show, he was surprised with the returns. And I think my wife was as well. It returns really well, like 40 to 60% of what good flower. And like most people don't extract their top buds, the stuff that they're going to toke on. So it's, and I also noticed because with a vape, I grind it up fairly fine to get airflow through there. It makes it sort of like a kefir product. And I think something about that kefiness, like more material fits in that jar when you wash it up and shake it. So it just tends
So
to
like a surface area to volume kind of thing.
totally. So like I've heard that grinding, and Spartan might be able to talk about this, but grinding up some of your material before you wash it might increase the yields depending on, I don't know if alcohol matters as much, but I know some people do it, some people don't do it. Milling before they extract or grinding.
Yeah. So the downside of doing that is it's still surface area. So the whole reason you're doing it is to get the surface area, but the downside is you're still exposing more surface area for chlorophyll to leach out at the same time. So that's why a lot of people don't tend to do that, because they're trying, especially edible side wise, to try to improve flavor. But
I
in the
don't.
extract side, it doesn't matter. You could, as long as you're keeping it really cold, you probably aren't going to have to worry about the chlorophyll leaching out. And you can, when they fill those columns, it looks like powder usually. They don't put huge nugs and stuff in there.
For us, it's a convenience thing, and like grinding up like frozen leaf out of the freezer like would be more difficult. So we just like, whatever amount we've got, we just fucking throw it in there, wash it once, gentle like 3-minute shake, and then like the next one we'll let it soak for like a day, shake it up a little bit harder, and like if there is more plant material, it's fine. I don't use any like dry ice or anything to get it to like the -40. Like some people go real intense with it and try and get it crystal clear and like super pure. But as I mentioned earlier, I kind of do think that there is something in the flower that is special, and if you get a little bit of plant material, it's like not the end of the world. Like I think it actually might have benefit. That's why I think I like hash more than distillate. Like the best hash in California you're going to see is between 50% on the low end of cannabinoids up to like 80s and 90s on the high end. But like true like old school hash like temple balls usually like 50 to 65, maybe 70% on the high end, a few percent terpenes, and then a lot of it is plant material. Like It just is. They're not using 5-star melt with a lot of the stuff. And that plant material, we smoke it all the time. If you smoke flower, then you smoke plant material. If you smoke flower rosin, there's plant material. Like if you consume 90% of cannabis products, you're getting some element of plant material, unless you love distillate and like that's your only way that you like to consume, then the plant material probably has benefits that you're getting medically. That would just be my early hypotheses. I haven't looked too deeply into like the benefits of chlorophyll and other things like that, but it just seems to me like whenever you go down that chain, you start to lose something. It might purify the effect or intensify the effect, but I think sometimes that even comes with like a shortening of the effect. You know, like when you take a dab, maybe you'll be lit for 15 minutes, 30, an hour, hour and a half, but it's never like the 4 or 5 hour long highs that you used to get with like a super heady sativa, even like a Blue Dream or a heady Thai. Everyone's opinion on soil predator mites.
Oh,
Casey,
sorry.
sorry, I didn't mean to change topic so suddenly. Go ahead, doctor.
Yeah, Bucks was asking a question I wanted to get to. But you can go ahead, or I can go ahead. You.
Well, I was just gonna say it's probably wax and lip. Are you talking about the actual hash? Is because it's not really, there shouldn't be that much green material at all in your hash, bubble hash.
No, I
Even
agree. It's
dry
usually
sift that's
brown
done good. Yeah, it'll
or
probably be
gold.
lipids and waxes from the stalks of the resin glands and the actual membrane probably that makes up a good percentage too. It's just what I was thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, I just whatever it is, I'm just referring to it loosely as plant material because it's not just cannabinoids, which so many people think that they're really shopping
Right.
for. Like, oh, the purest of the pure. Like I'm extracting it down to get that THC. I want that 60% THC from the hash or whatever. It's like for me, I know that's not what it is because I could buy distillate. They have it out
Right,
here.
right.
It's not like hard to find. The effect of it is not enjoyable. Even like a distillate pen that's like, I'd rather have a 95% distillate with 5% terpenes mixed in there than like a 99% distillate with nothing else. Because it just, the flavor and like I don't know. I don't know if that creates a true entourage effect. A lot of people say that terpenes are terpenes across the board, whether it comes from a pine tree or from a cannabis plant. Pinene is pinene. Other people feel like there are differences. There are different like analogs, like alpha versus beta pinene and other things like that. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one because I think most people would say that they've experienced the benefits of terpenes, but they can probably be found a lot cheaper in a lot of other places like nature. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, is it okay to get your limonene from citrus or does it have to come from a cannabis plant that's bred to have citrus notes? And like, if we're going towards extraction, does that matter? Like a lot of people don't mind the pen that has been extracted, but then there's like Steezy out here. They have like cannabis derived terps that you pay more for. You can get their distillate pens that have terpenes from wherever that, I don't know, everybody pays a different amount for. It's definitely we could go down that topic a little bit more, but JC asked about what is everyone's opinion on predator soil mites for indoors? So I'll pass that first to Matthew.
Well, I'm a big fan of them. I like to use so Boost. Did he say predatory soil mites? Did they say
That was how they wrote it, and so we'll go with that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with that specifically. So we recently talked about how, or I recently mentioned that I am often asked about springtails. The two or three topics that I'm often talked about the most are soil predatory mites, springtails, and like mold mites usually. Um, Predatory soil mites are ubiquitous in the environment. So are springtails for that matter, and a lot of those mold mites are too. So I feel like they're very common to get, especially if you're using bulk soil from somewhere else, or if you've used a natural inputs around, and if you have a lot of free organic matter, you start to see this sort of ecosystem erupt, kind of whether you want to or not, which uh, which will freak people out. But I think soil predatory mites are totally a boon, and it shouldn't be something that you should try to fix in the vast majority of cases. Some people might be afraid. I was talking with somebody, and I thought that it was kind of a valid concern about a year and a half ago. They were a home grower, and they were dealing with. They were growing up the plant, and I guess they were sharing the living room area or the space where they were growing with like a very young infant that they recently halved, and they were concerned that the sort of microarthropods in general could have a problem with the infant and maybe have some physiological influence. And I thought that was a valid concern. And so, but I suggested that they probably, if that's the case, if there's like this much like sort of spatial closeness and that can't be avoided, I kind of feel like the better option, if possible, would be to just not grow anything in that space for a period of time. I'm curious what people think about that, though.
I think you should let your kids play in the dirt.
Yeah, sometimes it's not an option.
This is a very young infant.
Yeah, I'm joking, kind of. I haven't had an
start them young, right? Get that, start developing that microbiome at an early age.
Yeah.
I'm not joking. I do. I'd put my son right in the grass. I mean, he was right there with me. So
I grew up. That's how I grew up. Like I was the third boy in the family. So like by the time I came around, my parents were like, it's like they were just happy that I came home in one piece, if that. And like my brothers were probably fucking throwing me face down into the dirt. So it's like you get that whether you want it or not.
I mean, if the medical doctors, if the medical doctors are going to sit here and tell me it's okay to jack my kid who doesn't even have an immune system barely with like 30 fucking vaccines at one time, I think he'll be okay fucking playing in the dirt.
I do think that there's a lot of truth to like eDNA in general not being a huge problem, or even having that exposure reaction, right? I'm actually not totally on the up and up. I'm a huge fan of like toxicology, and I find it a really interesting thing, like how venoms and toxins and things like develop and interact. But I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about it off the top of my head.
I wouldn't be surprised if the carpet off-gassing was more detrimental to the kid than if some spider mites got it.
Indoor air health is a huge problem for a lot of people. You make an excellent point.
My CO2 is almost 2,000.
That's kind of whataboutism, I feel like.
With no supplementation. And there was paint chips that were made out of lead that kids ate when I was fucking growing up as a kid. So you don't find out about that shit until later on when there's warnings and shit like that. Resurrection Prophet asks, is it safe to use pine needles for pH control? I heard a long time ago, everybody in gardening says, no, don't use pine needles, blah, 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 blah. Fuck your pH up. It's going to ruin your soil, this and that. I believe it was Dr. Elaine Ingham. I don't want to throw her name under the bus, but one of these soil scientist people said, yes, you can use pine needles, especially if they're abundant in your region, they're free. But she would recommend like throwing them into like a 55-gallon rain barrel, letting them dry, turn brown, and then whack them up with a weed whacker. I'm not sure why she recommended that. I think she said to do that before you compost them if you want to use them in your soil as part of the soil.
So I could understand doing that, and I don't know who it is who said that, but I feel like I've seen this question a lot before. I don't even associate with any particular group. Pine needles and other sorts of like leaves from various plants, they can totally have phytotoxic effects and be allelopathic. Like black walnuts and the jugalone, is that how it's pronounced, or jugalone or hugalone?
You'd be the one to know.
Yeah, but I'm not. But anyways, like there's a compound in like black walnut shells that's very bad for a lot of plants. So other plants don't grow near those trees, and so it allows those seedlings to have a developmental advantage.
That's the case for pine. Pine drops its needles and it makes everything around it so out of whack with the pH that nothing really grows. No weeds grow, no other trees grow. It's like,
but certainly some plants do.
Strong.
Certainly some plants do, though.
Like blueberries and like a few. It's rare. I'd say they're a smaller subset.
But it's the chemical compound, I think, more than the pH. I think they're actually like toxins. Like it's actually toxic, and I think that's why the suggestion to compost is really important, because you're kind of processing it.
So I don't know if the guy was fucking with me or not. This was when I first saw Matthew Gates speak in person. It was at the Hemp and Cannabis Business Conference in San Diego. I don't even want to mention where it was at, but I was talking to a guy who was in his 60s, probably approaching 70. And whenever I meet a grower who's older than me, who's been in the game longer than me, I try and ask him like, some of their tips and tricks just to see what they'll say. And like I sometimes I'll phrase it like, if you were my age going back as a grower, what would you tell yourself? And the one thing this guy said was, if you use just a little bit of pine needles in your soil, it adds more of a pine flavor to your cannabis, which I know has been discussed with like the strawberry cough, which was made from the strawberry fields, which was allegedly grown in a strawberry field. There's a whole bunch of discussion and debate about that history and backstory and whether or not cannabis can even take something up from the soil and bioaccumulate that into something that would be recognizable terpene or not. I'm still a skeptic about it, but there are products out there specifically like Terpenator and Perpenator and others, Botanicare Sweet and other things like that, that claim they can add flavors to your plant based on something that you put into the root zone. But they're more unnatural in some cases, like the Botanicare. They're just pumping, I believe, flavonoids into your root zone, which the plant is able to bioaccumulate. So there's multiple approaches to going about it. My thought has always been I'd rather get the flavor from my breeder and the cannabis, genetics than mixing something in my soil. But if I'm looking for pine, maybe using a touch of pine needles at a really, really low amount might be the way to go. But maybe he was trolling me. Maybe he was trying to be like anti-competitive, like, oh, there's these new kids, like, let's tell them to fucking put pine needles in their soil so they can learn, like, not to be a dumbass and kill off their plants and maybe make them quit. So I don't know.
Wow.
No, I read some sort of reliable source saying that pine needles are fine as long as they're not fresh. They say if they're fresh, they're really bad. But once they're like even brown and like you're saying, if you put them in a compost, they shouldn't do harm. But I will say, I also heard that eucalyptus leaves are detrimental bad to cannabis plants. So I don't know about that because I have no eucalyptus trees around here. But anyone who might, I've
They're
read
everywhere
that
here.
eucalyptus is bad.
Everywhere in San
Yeah, so you
Diego,
can
I'll
use it
agree
for
with that.
mulch.
Okay.
It's literally a problem. They're like taking down like 500 in the next year because I don't think that they're native and they grow really tall and then
They're
fall
not
and
native.
they
And
die.
they get
The
really
other
so.
issue, they have the roots that go down and attack water mains, and
Oh,
the roots
yeah.
can grow tremendously long distances. They seek out sources of water. They'll grab onto a water main and break it. And
Yeah, that's true.
That's gangster. Nature, don't fuck around. That's for sure.
Well,
yeah, it is. They're gnarly trees.
isn't it also true that like they break very commonly?
Yeah, they splinter
cause-
in a strong storm. You can't
And-
use the wood when you chip it up for like mulch and gardens
Yeah.
and stuff like that. They're
We have
just,
the rainbow ones too,
it
so they
burns
chip
well,
even
too.
quicker.
Yeah.
And like,
and it burns, of course, incredibly well, which has not been great for California.
yeah, we're definitely not big fans of it here, even though somebody somewhere got really interested in them because they planted hundreds of them all around San
they're a
Diego,
really
especially like North
fast
County.
growing tree. So if you want a tree quickly, planting a eucalyptus in Southern California is a good way to get like trees quickly.
But not timber, unfortunately.
No, but like for a park or something like this, right? So
True.
They're always on hiking trails and stuff like between city development planning where like I think they probably had to legally keep a certain amount of it as like undeveloped, like nature or whatever.
Yeah.
It's often on hiking trails, but like right now when it's like windy, rainy season, I'll be hiking and there will be giant ass eucalyptus that have snapped over and fallen down that are just laying in the middle of the woods now.
oh yeah, there's a little grove of eucalyptus where we used to live, and walking past there in a strong storm, I mean, you were taking like your life in your hands because you'd see like large hunks of tree falling down around you.
Definitely, and especially during these rains, I think, because the boughs of the tree will get very heavy,
Yeah.
and they'll just snap off, right?
Hey, I
And if
wanted to
they're-
get to Buck's question if we got time for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry about that.
He wanted to ask about his little seedlings and whether or not he said he was starting high frequency fertigation in pretty small pots and fertigating once a day, and wanted to know if that was enough or too much. Once a day is good for seedlings. It's certainly not too much in cocoa if there's decent drainage. And if you're in a small pot, you can do more than once per day, especially once the plant is sort of established in the container. Assuming again that it's
That's
like
a
good size. What's that?
That's a big part. The established in the container. Sorry, I'm about to hit a bong over here, but I wanted to say that because when I would try and water them too much before getting the plant established, even in cocoa, it seemed like the plant wasn't as happy as when I like watered it and maybe waited like a day or two till it got a little bit on, at least for
And
the
I would
seedling.
never recommend waiting over 24 hours in between watering and cocoa, especially for seedlings, just because of the impact that that drying period has on the electrical conductivity in the root zone. So it's not really about, but yeah, so I sort of agree, Jack, but I would just say once a day then. I don't like going 2 days. But when you let a little pot sit for that long, even with a little plant in it, a lot of water evaporates out of the pot, and that just makes the water that's left sort of saltier and saltier. And the roots are so tender at that age that you run a bigger risk of sort of frying the roots with high EC than you do of like creating hypoxic conditions, which is like not enough oxygen for the roots. And it's one of the reasons that I really like starting small plants in small containers, though, because if you are in too big of a container, you can sort of create not enough oxygen for the roots. But in a small container, if you're fertigating pretty frequently, you get a sort of better control over the electrical conductivity. You sort of keep topping it off. It's easier to maintain sort of the conditions that the roots are exposed to. And you can provide, one of the big problems with growing seedlings in cocoa is they often become calcium deficient, and more frequent applications of the fertigations provide sort of a fresh dose of calcium more frequently. And the calcium is available in the water sort of after you apply it, and then the cocoa starts absorbing it and renders it sort of not available to the plant. So if you're fertigating more frequently, there's just sort of more frequent access to calcium for the plant.
Less room
I
for
posted
error
my
too.
seedling guide in the chat there. I usually do once a day for the first few days and then work them up to twice a day. But I sometimes get too busy and get lazy. That's the other side of it, is it's the only time I'm not using automatic watering. So it all depends on, gardener like due diligence.
Your guide recommends a pretty low EC at the seedling stage, right? Like a 0.4, if I'm remembering correctly, which is a lot lower.
Or 400 exactly. Start them off low.
One more thing I wanted to say before I let you go on is Kyle, predicative breeding with us. He's about to get heading out, so I wanted to give him a chance to give his final thoughts and shout outs before he has to run and we get too deep into the conversation.
Sure.
Hey, yeah, sorry guys. I have some things I'm trying to catch up on, but I'm just glad everyone's here and glad everyone's doing well. I hope that people are still learning from what we're doing. But yeah, if anyone wants any feminized seeds, I do have a pretty good selection still up there. I do need to make some new ones, which is in the process right now. I would say in maybe a couple of months, I'll have a brand new line coming out, so it's pretty exciting. But yeah, if anyone wants to look at anything I'm working on, social media wise, it's predicative breeding on all social media platforms, and that website for the feminized seeds is pbreeding.com. And I'm just really happy to still doing this. And take care, everybody, and have a safe night.
Cheers to you, Kyle. Thank you so much for coming, and we definitely are still helping people. I just got a message from JC who says you guys have taught me so much and how thankful they are. So we're definitely making an impact. Sometimes it may not feel like that, or if you're not getting a chance to jump in as much, but yeah, JC says, mad respect. You all have taught me so much. So thank you, JC. Thank you, Kyle. pbreeding.com to find his feminized breeding genetics. And yeah, really awesome stuff from Kyle. Thank you so much again for joining us this week. We always appreciate your time.
Take care, guys.
I wanted to say something that I just saw in the chat that is sort of a little bit off topic, but we were just talking about. We could go back to seedlings. Bingus and somebody else were going back and forth. Chris we're talking about, he said strawberry came from Cedarberry Farms, was the first real strawberry around the 90s. This is the agenda that's pushed by a guy named Matthew Riot. And just a lot of stuff that comes out of his mouth is drama pushing and not always the most credible. I used to think he was a hard-nosed cannabis historian, but he really just drums up a lot of drama and makes a lot of claims where there's not necessarily. I just wrote a book on cannabis history. I could tell you it's not always black and white. There's not always a true answer. There are four sour diesel stories in my book. That's one of the only strains that doesn't have this is the breeder, this is who made it, this is the company. But of the 50 strains, that was like one of the very few that didn't have a, dedicated strain. But going to the whole strawberry cough thing, saying it's Erd beer from Switzerland, I've heard that story. Again, it's coming out of Matt Riot's mouth and being parroted by a lot of people in the community. There is not any confirmation that says that. There's the whole guy, Strawberry Jerry, who's connected to the Strawberry Fields family. Most people don't even know that strawberry cough is not the plant that was grown in the strawberry field. Everybody says it's strawberry cough, and it's wrong. It's just not even true. Strawberry cough is a cross of strawberry fields and haze. It wasn't bred by Kyle Cushman. A lot of people think it was bred by Kyle Cushman. It was not. It was given to him. It was given to him in a bag, and it stunk like strawberry and veg. And he was surprised that it was still alive after like some road trip or whatever. He opened it up. It was alive, and it smelled like strawberry. So he's like, oh, fuck, I got to grow this out. Turned out to be amazing. He gave it out to hundreds of people all over the U.S. So naturally in cannabis, especially back then in Prohibition, when you get it from somebody, they might have told you, oh, yeah, I got this from so-and-so. But you remember, oh, I got it from, like everybody calls the Velvet Punch Jack's Velvet Punch. It's Doja DNA's Velvet Punch. I wrote that on the paperwork. I told everybody that, but they all give it Jack's Velvet Punch because I'm the one who gave it to him. I'm the one who made the F2 seeds. I don't deserve the credit for breeding it. The guy did a decade of work on the hill. Like, he deserves the work and the credit. That's why every single time I repost it, I tag him. But going back all the way to the original thing, it's like the strawberry cough story is so misunderstood. And it's just one example of cannabis history not being straight. Like, I do want to write a book on that as well in the future, like the origin strains, like the foundational strains, like where they came from. Like 50 strains of green and 50 strains of purple later this year are going to be like a start, just to like give people a base of here's 100 strains that are notable, that I think are beautiful, that I enjoyed. But also, I think there's going to be, I'm waiting more for the history stuff because a lot of these people come out of the woodwork. I just saw Chem Dog, the guy who popped the Chem 91. He's alive. He's still blowing glass, and now he's growing legally in a legal market in Florida, I think. So it's cool to see, like,
that book yet, Jack?
It sounds like a
Not for the
really
new
interesting nexus of like ethnobotanical and like
You could call it some strain you used to know.
I like that,
I
man.
think-
And it's
That's such a good idea for an ethnobotanical PhD dissertation.
it
You gotta get
definitely
somebody on
is.
this. Yeah,
Definitely
I can
is.
just see the grant proposal for this now. I love it.
well, it's fascinating
Yes.
stuff. It's like anthropological too. It's like this is a
It is
history.
absolutely it is. Well, and you would have to
Indeed,
start
yeah.
you would have to start. I mean, I would start with like prehistory, right, with evolution and stuff, and then of course interweave this, and as we learn about the genetics more and more, but and then also the millennia ago, and then like hundreds of years ago, and I've tried to find some of that information. Actually.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more just about the contemporary, like ethnographic field work that people could do.
Oh, that's actually
with
true
the
as well.
historically informed background, but it's an interesting community to define as sort of your cultural group, and it's certainly a community that has a lot of botanical knowledge, a lot of what we'd call folk knowledge. It would be fascinating to sort of document that in the way an ethnobotanical researcher would.
There's an amazing spot right now that the last 24 hours to like a week has really documented some awesome cannabis history.
Sun-grown mids.
I was just about to say, I saw you liked one of the posts, and it's Sun-Grown Mids. He's posted like Shanti Baba of Mr. Nice Seed Bank, and he has like a big story. He has like Neville from Sensi Seeds. He has DJ Short holding this plant. You probably can't see it because I'm going to turn my brightness down, and hopefully it'll come through. I should probably do a share screen for my computer with the Instagram if I was more tech savvy. There's DJ Short, a breeder who bred the blueberry as well as the flow. That's like in the 70s or 80s. But he goes through and details like DJ Short, an American cannabis breeder who has been working his line since the 70s. Over the last 40 plus years, DJ Short has carried out an extensive line breeding, 3-way polyhybrids. And he goes through and breaks down some of the most notable cannabis breeders over his last like 6 or 7 posts. And they've been absolutely fantastic. I'm like a cannabis history buff. I would self-proclaimed, I guess. And I love this shit. And he really did a great job of like documenting each one of those people and like saying who they are, what they did, what their contribution to the community was, what genetics they were working with, when they were working with them, and like why it matters. And like I always, like with research, when I was in college, a lot of the time you would hear stand on the shoulders of giants. And I love that saying because like we all are doing that, like whether it's general agriculture and like how they've advanced corn from what the Native Americans got. Like everybody moved it forward like one step, and now we're at where we're at now. And not to say that all of it's great, but like where we're at in cannabis is something I say like I think a lot of us can be proud of in the community with like what we've done, our hands that have personally touched it, and all the breeders and people that are doing the little bits of work here and there in the community. So it's cool to see and document and sort of pay the respects to the people that were maybe doing it before it was legal, or even in the newly legal areas. Like, no disrespect to those people. Fucking props to all the people that just started breeding for the first time this year, or last year, or 5 years ago. Like, whatever it is, you don't have to have been doing this for decades. It's like this community is open for everybody. That's what's so great about it. That's why it's been just evolving and getting better and better. So I'm gonna smoke one and let's see what you guys have to say.
I definitely want to start. I mean, I definitely want to echo the sentiment that I do sometimes feel like some folks who have been growing for a long time are quite disparaging towards people who are newer, and we see this in tons of disciplines. It's not a unique phenomenon, and I do think that it's sort of unfortunate when that occurs. But I've also been really motivated in general in agriculture and horticulture. It's astounding to me how much, even in non-cannabis spaces, how often it is that people who are farming are not very competitive with each other, even though you would think that they would be from like a zero sum game, economic theory, which admittedly is a bad way to look at economics, but it's just kind of fascinating. There's a lot of camaraderie in agriculture, and even in the cannabis space too, as well. And I love to facilitate that and see that being facilitated, Jack.
I think we both have an advantage of the non-durable goods part of it and just an endless demand. There will be endless demand for cannabis and food, no matter what. So I think like that's why we don't have to be so competitive. It's just an ongoing. No matter how much you grow, it's going to disappear eventually.
That's like, it's the law of scarcity in any business. I think a lot of businesses like want to rush to shut that other business out, but then like the ones that just like help their other businesses like end up being more successful. And like I think a lot of us don't have that scarcity mentality for sure. I wanted to say I want to apologize to Chris R, because like when I was doing cannabis research, there'd be times where I would share information like that Erdberry story, because I used to follow Matt Riot and I used to think that he was a very highly knowledgeable person about cannabis history, and in some elements he can be. He's been in it for a long time. He's been breeding for a long time. He was one of the first people to be feminized breeding and selling the sprays and selling fem cookies and all this and that. But he definitely gets a lot wrong, and I have too in the past. Nobody's perfect, but when I see somebody sharing a story like that in the comments, I could directly tell you where it's coming from. And like certain people, there are camps within the community. Certain people like certain breeders and believe certain stories and this and that. So it's no disrespect for anybody for believing some of the things that you read or not believing them, but I would say be skeptical and look for proof. And a lot of the people are out there now, they're still alive and like talking about the shit and where it came from and showing pictures of like, oh yeah, this is when I lived in Oregon and I was breeding this with that and I found this plant and where I got it from this guy. And you can go watch the podcast of basically any breeder at this point, or fucking talking shit with Eagle. Like enough breeders have come out and told their story and showed you where it's come from, that you don't have to like go and look at X, Y, or Z seed bank that says we have the real Girl Scout cookies, buy our shit. It's like no one's selling real Girl Scout cookies or GSC seeds. Like at best they're an S1. So just like do your research and be informed, be educated, and you're listening to the show, so you're already kind of doing that. And we're helping you avoid sort of like getting scammed and overpaying for seeds or anything else, clones, whatever. Just be knowledgeable and do your research before you get in with the wrong people. I see a lot of people saying like, oh, I'm growing this strain, and then I end up seeing who they got it from, and they're like really unhappy with it, and then they'll talk shit about this strain because, oh, I grew it and it was garbage. And it's like, you grew that from, I'll say one that I know there's not going to be backlash because they're too big and professional. Like Barney's Farm. A lot of people have gotten good shit from Barney's Farm, and I'm not mad at you if you did. But Barney's Farm has literally made some of my favorite breeders stop breeding. Like Breeder Steve, one of the best breeders, I think, in cannabis modern history. He was formerly of Spice of Life Seeds. He was the guy who made Shishka Berry, Blockhead, Sweet Tooth, a lot of other really amazing shit. Barney's Farm went and just took his shit, did the same exact names and like undercut them, sold more, sold them for less, sold them more widely, and it just like disincentivized him from making the real shit because everybody's like, oh, Blockhead sucks, Sweet Tooth sucks, like your shit's garbage, and that he's like, no, that's some other person shit trying to represent themselves as me, you know. And it's like there's so much of that in this industry, and it's such a simple, like you can go on like seedfinder.eu and like Google Sweet Tooth, and there will be like 20 different people that have made Sweet Tooth, and then like you might have to do some research, like who made Sweet Tooth, and then it might end up being like he doesn't even make the seeds anymore, so fuck, you can't even buy them. So you might try the Barney's Farm version. Maybe it's good, maybe it sucks, but it's tough.
But yeah, Jack, if there's clone only specimens that people have come to know what that strain is, when you start from seed, it's not going to be that clone. You know, most likely it will not be that clone.
We even get some clonal variation.
Right, but I mean, like, because like if there's
cultivation variation,
I don't know which elite clones are clone only, but even if you get the genetics that made that clone only clone, you're not going to get that clone from those genetics, those exact same genetics. So
right, like
that's another issue.
S1 Purple Punch isn't going to be Purple Punch. Purple Punch is Granddaddy Purple crossed with Larry OG. It's from Supernova Gardens in Hawaii. Real simple. They don't sell seeds of it. If you buy it from Barney's Farm, you're getting who knows what. You know, do they even have the Purple Punch cut? Who knows? You know, so they could just literally sell any seeds and say Purple Punch S1. And then like you're growing something that maybe they have like a purple Afghani that they just decided to relabel as Purple Punch S1. So you're like, I got the Purple Punch and didn't grow that well, or maybe it did, and you're like, oh, my Purple Punch is awesome. So you start showing everybody, I got the Purple Punch, and then they start thinking like this is what Purple Punch is, and they come out to like California and see everybody else growing it, and it's like totally different. Like Purple Punch, in my opinion, is grapey and gassy. It's similar to the Velvet Punch. It's the mom of the Velvet Punch. It's something I'm familiar with, both the strain itself and crosses of it. But as somebody who's like, you look into these genetics, it's like history with dog breeding. If you look at like a Chihuahua and a Corgi, you know what both of those look like, and then you like see a Chorgi, like the cross of a Chihuahua and a Corgi. Some of them are going to be more Corgi dominant, some of them are going to be more Chihuahua dominant, and there's going to be a mix. But like you'll look at it and you're like, no, okay, that's a mix. It's not either one of its parents. So you're not expecting its parents, but it might have elements that you like of either parent within it. And that's like the beauty of growing cannabis. It's like some of the crosses you get, like the Velvet Punch, it has Cookie 7 as a parent, which most people don't even know what Cookie 7 is. I'm not going to get into it. But Purple Punch is his mom, and people that like Purple Punch might want to grow Velvet Punch, but I'm not going to tell you that it's Purple Punch seeds. I might tell you, oh yeah, it has some Purple Punch characteristics. Like if you look at Spartan Grown, he has a grapey pheno. But Cookie 7 is the male in the F1 at least. And so he has a pheno that has cookie type nugs, really, really small, frosty, but tight buds, which is not Purple Punch-esque. It's more of an OG, which yields bigger spear type colas that are purple and frosty. The American one, I know you're growing some of the Velvet Punch as well. Do you have any of those going into flower anytime soon?
I just put them in there. There's one that I want to get a little bit more beefy and a little more happy in the 5-gallon container, but I got 3 of them in there, and they're all looking insane. The one really, and then I found a male that was the match, but I just couldn't keep it. I have no room for males right now. I got 3 that I'm keeping now, but yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you. I was going to show you before we got here. I got in too late.
It's all good. I was going to say, don't worry about keeping males. You or anybody else who's got the Velvet Punch F2s, unless you really want to use that male and make your own seeds, go ahead. I wouldn't mind at all. I am making F3s right now. They're in day like 11 of flower, and I've got a beautiful male selected and 2 females that I'm forwarding onto the F3. I'm also doing a little cross with the Sangria that's like totally getting dominated by the 2 Velvet Punches on either side of it in the earth box. It's like 2 massive plants that are like all the way up here, and then there's like the one little plant in the middle, like just struggling to, I'm like pushing them both to the side because it's that one in the middle, the Sangria. It's a different genetic. It was from veg, tighter node spacing. I didn't plan that well. I should have done more of a monocrop, but I wanted to do something in respects to my late buddy Subcool. Never met him in person, but I was always in his live streams, and he knew who I was. I was one of his testers, and run his Sangria, which I was gifted from Eagle for the Growing with Eagle. And I got a male and female, and I almost made Sangria F2s, but I was like, you know what? my original plan was to make Velvet Punch F3, so I'm gonna stick with that plan, but also get some Sangria across. And I'm actually pretty excited, even though it's small. It's kind of rare, I guess, to get the what's called like the green apple pheno, which the Sangria smells a lot like a green apple, like candy, just like really sweet and like appley. So I thought it was gonna be more of like a wine because it's called Sangria, like a fruity wine. But it is early in flower, only like day 11, maybe 12. So we'll see. But Tao, me and you are both in the early flower with the Velvet Punches. Spartan's got one he just flipped that might actually be not a Velvet Punch. The one male that I kept around that might have contaminated was a lamb's pupil, which is super short and stocky, which you just flipped that one versus the other ones were like week 8, maybe, week 8 flower.
Yeah, they're I think they're week 7 maybe, but yeah, I'm actually really stoked on that one. I don't know why, I just love the short ones, short, stocky, and really tight node spacing. I don't know, man, she's beautiful. I love her.
The stalk is like, it literally looks like if you taped 2 green Bic lighters together, like back to back. It's like thick. It's just fucking, I love those plants that are hardy and like you just shake the hell out of it and it's just not gonna do anything to it. That male, the reason I kept it, I went on vacation and my plant sitter, she didn't water the seedlings. She only watered the plants that were in flower. And so all the seedlings died, like 9 out of 10 of them. And the one that lived was that lamb's pupil male, which is a freebie that I got in a pack with Bodhi seeds. I don't even want to name the breeder who breeds the lamb's pupil because I don't have respect for them anymore because a lot of shit that came out later on. But I have cut out anything. Like I had a plant number 4 that I pollinated 50-50 with Velvet Punch and lamb's pupil that was in a completely separate area. But the other 3 plants were only pollinated by the Velvet Punch male. So like my plants 1, 2, and 3 were all Velvet Punch F2s. But then the plant number 4 had like 50-50 Velvet Punch F2 and then lamb's pupil crossed the Velvet Punch. But some of that male's pollen, I think, got into like Spartan had one of his phenos that is clearly not a Velvet Punch on Velvet Punch because it's just way too tight of a node spacing, which that male ended up being like the tightest node spacing plant. That was another reason I kept it around and wanted to breed with it because I grow in a 5 foot tall tent. So I was like, maybe I'll cross it to something that's tighter node spacing. So it'll be easier, keep it short. But what I realized is, like Dr. MJ mentioned, like stretch is good. Like don't fight the stretch. Like I like the stretchy Velvet Punches because I can veg them for a shorter time, flip, and then just take advantage of the massive production and flower and then get more runs per year. So
You're
it's like,
here.
I'm all for the fucking give me the stretch.
Use
man.
the stretch. Plan for the stretch, right?
Yeah, but when you run perpetual, it doesn't matter. Veg doesn't matter anymore.
That's true.
Your flower is always full, so it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
I've thought about before I switched to the Earth Box, making like a 3-tiered system. So I'd have like a staircase, like step 1, step 2, step 3, and then like the first plant would be like day 0 of flower. Then like the second step would be like, I don't know, week 3, and then like the final one would be like, fully finished stretching or whatever. So then each few weeks you could just pull out 1 plant at a time. Because before I was doing 3 plants side by side and just sort of like monocropping. And if one was a little bit shorter, I would just stack it up on little risers to get it closer to the light. But now with the Earth Box, the plants are physically in the same soil bed. So if one plant is shorter than the others, I can't raise it up closer to the light. And doing a perpetual is possible. Like I could have like 1 small plant on the left, 1 medium plant in the middle, and then like the tallest one on the right. But then it would be like kind of going back and forth. And I don't know, I just try to pop my seeds on time enough and have a separate veg space so that when I crop, I just have very short time between the harvest and the next grow. How many runs do you guys try and get in per year in your home grow? For me, it's like 3 or 4 usually per year. Now that I got the herbs now, I'm going for like 4 or 5. But I know some people push like 6 crops a year if they're really fucking on it. So I'm curious, Spartan, how many times do you harvest as a perpetual grower per year?
I will just say that I harvest at least once a month.
So 12 crops a year then.
I'll say I harvest at least once a month. That's what I'll say.
I admire that dedication to the craft, Spartan.
I
Split up your
I
trimming.
like it. That's real farming right there. That's
Yeah, no, that's no joke. I mean, that's no joke because in order to do that, it's not just the harvest labor once a month. It's all the rest of you got seedlings going, you got plant training, you got, all sorts of different things at different stages you got to be keeping track of. So that's a
Spartman
farmer.
Spartman the Yaleman. You even have the beard that makes the picture complete.
I don't know, man. I have my system. It works for me. I actually believe that perpetual allows me to divide the work up into little chunks rather than having that huge hit all at once,
Yeah.
which increases my quality at the same time. And I also have fresh product all the time. Well, not all the time, but more often than I would if I didn't have a perpetual. So for all those reasons is why I fell into a perpetual hobby.
Oh, I think it's a great rhythm. If it fits you, I totally agree with that. That just, to me, it just shows that you're keeping track of a lot of things at the same time.
That's my life, dude. That's all I do is grow.
It's a constant shuffle.
Love it.
It's
I
like a
love it.
rotating table. You got to like one goes from there to there, and then you got to replace the one, and it's worth the work, obviously, because
it's so worth the work. When you spend that much time, and Spartan does it at work too, right? When you spend that much time like interacting with plants, it just does good things for your psyche, your emotional well-being, like everything else. It's good stuff.
I definitely agree with that.
I think that's one of the more therapeutic parts about growing cannabis is the actual time spent in the garden. I think like usually when I see people like getting all bent out of shape, whether it's like on a show or on Instagram, like back and forth arguing with people, I'm like, they need to spend more time in their garden. Like they should be with their plants right now if they could be.
The gardening is a huge mental health benefit. And, the community, everybody that's here in the chat right now chatting, everybody that comes and does their grow journals at Cocoa for Cannabis or goes on Instagram and does things. Having that sense of community now is a huge mental health benefit. Especially under quarantine and other things like that. So there's several dimensions for why being a home grower is a healthy occupation.
It's funny, I get these things. They say like one thing, I think it's called One Thing US. It's like on the radio, and they try to tell you like do one thing to like basically better the environment usually. And like they're like switch from CFLs to LED bulbs, and then they'll so the one that they actually recommended, which I was kind of surprised on, was start an indoor garden with like a grow light, like get an LED grow light and grow your own food or whatever. And I was like,
cheers to that.
Cheers. Yeah, I'm fucking growing my own shit already.
Yeah, your own food,
LED.
right? Yeah.
It is food. And my cats eat it. I eat it. I save the leaves and I'll blend them up into a smoothie with some fruit and things like that. And I'll even just eat some veg or flour. I think that there's, like I said earlier about the whole plant material thing, I think there's not, like for me at least, there's obviously a limit for everybody. You don't want to like overdo it with any sort of dosages. Like if you take 10,000 milligrams of edibles or like 15 grams of RSO at one time, it's obviously going to like make you pass out or be super paranoid and way too high. But as far as like consumption of the cannabis plant goes for me, like when I feel like ingesting it and it's calling to me, I just indulge, it's like, it is a medicine. It has a lot of therapeutic benefits in and of itself in the consumption, whether you're eating it or inhaling it, vaporizing, smoking. There's so many other ways. Like I had a drink the other night. It's a 2-to-1, 2-part THC and 1-part CBD. It's like a cucumber lime, like sparkling water or something. And it was actually pretty good. Cheers to the Major General 420 Army. He always says, give me that Donnie Burger and Spartan Level High, which cheers to both those things. I'm popping the Donnie Burger next. I mentioned, I think probably last show, that I'm growing it. Instead of doing 3 plants in the earth box, I'm going to do 1 and 1. So my best of the American ones, Amy Aces, is going to go against the best of the Donnie Burger female. So I'm going to pop like 5, maybe all 10, who knows, depending on the germ rate, and then hunt through to see how the ladies are growing and enjoying my soil and veg and lights and all that, and pick the best ones that I think are growing the healthiest for throwing into flower.
I always grew just 1 plant in those earth boxes.
Oh yeah, most people do.
I'm just one time I tried 2, and the second one was such a runt. I cut it. I said, "Fuck this! It's not even worth it."
I'm doing 3 right now, and the 2 on the outside are fucking beasting, like hard as fuck. And I'm wondering, like, I know it's 2 parts. 1 part genetics, because in veg, when they're in their separate pots, the sangria was shorter and tighter node spacing. But 2 parts now that they're sharing soil space, 3 plants in a earth box, like 2 beasts and then 1 tiny plant in the middle. I know that those 2 beasts are now robbing that middle plant of not only light, but soil. Like it's using its root zone. I can guarantee you, like I'm probably not going to till it up, but if I wanted to, when I cut them and pull out those root balls, the one root ball is going to be tiny in the middle, and there's going to be two massive ass root balls that are probably touching each other on the outsides, because they're drinking like 2 gallons almost a day at this point, and they're I don't know, loving. I love the earth box as far as growing cannabis is concerned for an organic grower. It keeps it super simple with the watering level, and um, yeah, definitely a huge fan. I love the
Dude,
mulch layer.
I just recommend it to everybody. Most anybody, unless they're saying they want to run synthetics or something, I always tell them just get a fucking sip container, man. It makes it so easy.
I can't even believe like how much the plants are just praying all the time now. Like before, like I used to tell myself like I don't think that praying is like always like the happiness, but maybe it is. I don't know. They just look lush and green and healthy and happy, so I'm not gonna question it. The one thing I will say, if anybody does run them, I don't personally like, and Smiley's Garden and I talked a little bit about this, I don't like to run it all the way until it runs off. Like if you do the 3 gallons and make it start dripping, I think that the plants like a little bit of a gap. There's like the soil, there's a little plastic thing that allows the roots to grow through. I think a little tiny air gap between the water and the soil is a beneficial thing, because every time that I watered it full until it dripped, the plants did sort of droop. They looked like they were overwatered for at least like the next day, and then they'd get perky and happy. But when I do like 1.5, 1 or 2 gallons, they always are just happy as hell the whole time. So that's my experience
Yeah,
so far.
I never fill it to drips. I used to when I first started, I guess. But I quickly got to the point to where I didn't, because I don't want to take care of water, right? So if I had it dripping, then I had to put a fucking saucer there, and then I had to fucking collect that water. So I measured right away how much I could get in there without it having to overflow. And right now I think it's 2 gallons I can put in them, and if they're completely empty. I have like 1 or 2 of them that I can only do about 1.5 gallons that I can throw in for some reason there. I don't know.
I think the soil probably slipping down through the cracks. Like when you fill it, it's not like a really tight grate. Like the grate is kind of chunky. And when I was pouring that soil, I was like, there's got to be a fucking ton of soil sitting in that bottom basin down there. But I tried my
Not a
best
whole
to
lot, dude.
pack the corners, and it works really well. And like I said, like you were saying with the 3 gallon thing, um, running off for me, I actually tried to get it to run off one time, because in the winter here, in most places, it gets a little bit more dry. And so I turned down my exhaust, but I was still in like the lower range, like high 30s, mid 40s for humidity. And I wanted to just bump it up a little bit. And so I watered the earth box until it started dripping out the bottom, because I have a tent with the waterproof tray. And in the past, I would just water stuff and let it run off, and that water evaporates up into the room, and it adds a little bit of RH that way. So I figured that would help, but then that's when I realized they were much, much happier running like a little bit, I almost want to say like on the drier side, but just a little bit less water in the reservoir.
Looks like we lost Jack or me.
I can hear you.
Okay.
I think we lost
I think we
Jack.
lost Jack.
We're gonna
Just
get
for a
the
second.
accordion.
Oh, he's
Gonna
going to
get-
come through in the compressed mode.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Oh,
compressed.
this is going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
I stopped talking, so hopefully it's just not super bad. Can you hear me now?
Oh, you know what? It didn't tell us, so it was better this time.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it just gave me that your connection is unstable, so hopefully I don't get chopped out too badly.
Shout out to Resurrection Prophets, whose habaneros are finally blooming. Um, I've been growing some basil at home. Just in that very sort of like what's in vogue way to get like a basil plant and just have it for like herbs and cooking and that kind of a thing. And I'm also baking sourdough with a sourdough culture that I got from a friend. And I definitely agree with the idea of like getting exposed to like microbes, and how that can have interesting influences on yourself.
I volunteer as a guinea pig for whenever that stuff's ready.
Well, definitely. I'll definitely bring some over, man.
But I definitely got a big shout out to microbes in general, whether it's making sourdough or like Brandon Rust, who's not with us this evening, who makes his Microbe Plus. And again, he doesn't pay me or anything for this, but I've started adding it even more often, and the plants just seem to love it. That and his Amino N Plus. Fucking, if you grow with organics, it's super fairly priced. I think I got both the products for a small garden, especially. Like it was way less than $100. I got all three actually. I got Bokashi, I got the Micro Plus, and the Amino N Plus, and all three of them seem to benefit my garden one way or another. The Bokashi definitely with worm castings, like a one handful sprinkled across the top of the earth box, and within a few days I saw what I hadn't seen before because I wasn't mulching properly, which was that mycelium mat or fungal network, whatever, that like nice white bloom that a lot of people in organics show off with their healthy organic plants, and the plants seem really happy with it, so I just assume that it's a good thing. But you never know, some of those symbiotic relationships, hopefully they're good, but I usually just let the plant health guide me overall with that. Matthew, do you have anything growing in your garden at all right now?
No cannabis at the moment, but I have a loquat tree that's doing pretty good. Um, I've got a what's it called? I'm blanking on the name now. Dang, it's not a cherry plant. It's not a cherry tree, but it's they call it a uh Serenia. I forget the name. I'm sure people in the chat might know what I'm talking about, but it's not actually a cherry, but it's kind of a lobed fruit. That's kind of the size. It's almost the size of a cherry, and that's a pretty good plant, and that's growing pretty well right
That's
now. I transplanted a passion fruit vine, but I'm wary about whether or not the flowers will actually become fruit. Oh, and I'm really excited that somebody on Instagram who grows purple and red sugarcane, which people who watch this show might remember I really fell in love with in China. I might be getting some shoots, and I'd love to grow some for my personal consumption, which would be pretty cool. I have a green cane plant that's been around for about 8 years now. Um, so
that sounds
since I
awesome.
was there, yeah.
I love sugarcane. When I was in Hawaii, I had some fresh. The only problem was when I brought it home, I fucking tried to cut some and it didn't have like a proper thing, and I split my finger open cutting it. But other than
Oh,
that, great experiences with sugarcane. I've heard that it's horrible to harvest, like the people in like Haiti and places down there where they grow a lot of it. It's not the best farming conditions for the workers, but
it's
definitely.
terrible. Absolutely terrible.
I think that people actually like die somewhat often, like working those fields because it's like giant ass plants and they have to machete them down and they often like cut themselves in the field and there's tons of infections and it's brutal work
Yeah,
on all accounts.
it's definitely not the way that it should be harvested. I would say, and even on like on a smaller scale, it is a little bit arduous. But you know the main problem is it's the push to like be unsafely quick, and the human cost is not a factor in those cases, which is very unfortunate. And a lot of agriculture is like that. As much as we like to not think about it.
Unfortunate and stuff that we do like to think about the homegrown front. You're growing a plant that's similar to a cherry, which is interesting because from what I understand and looking through some of the California Rare Fruit Growers
Suriname
Association.
cherry.
Okay, Suriname cherry.
Suriname cherry. Suriname
So
cherry.
that is interesting to me because when I looked into, I actually was cherries. A lot of cherries, the tart cherries, have elements in them that help people with insomnia. And when I was struggling with it more, I was thinking like, oh, maybe I should grow some cherries. Like everything grows well in San Diego, but I found out that there was something that grows really well in Michigan. I think produces tons of cherries, but I don't think that California grows very many cherries. In San Diego specifically, it's tough. And one of the people posted there's like one type of cherry that actually grows well, and maybe it's that one that you're growing or a different variety. But I love that Rare Fruit Growers Association. I got into that after growing cannabis, and I'm like trying to plot out what my next thing is going to be. I've got some seeds from finger lime, which is like the uh, lime australiensis or whatever, but they're the tiny little. They call them caviar lime sometimes, and my wife and I sort of fell in love with them, and we were eating them for weeks and weeks, and finally I popped one open and it shot out a seed. So I kept the seed, and maybe we'll grow it someday. And more recently, got a my wife told me, oh, we got organic cuties, the little oranges or whatever. It's like, oh, cool. So I thought they were just cuties. I looked at it, it was orange skin. And I took it with me. I was in the car on the way to work and I was like peeling it, kind of not looking at it. And then when I looked down, it had kind of like a thicker, like white outer layer. But then as I got the skin all the way off and split it in half, it was like bright, like almost like pink, like red. So it was like a blood orange or blood cutie, I don't know. But it ended up having 2 seeds in it, so I kept those as well. Although the citrus greening thing is going around in San Diego specifically, I'm
Yeah.
going to be kind of waiting on that. And citrus cultivation is something that takes a little bit of space, unless you want to do like a really high intensity training dwarf tree, which is possible, but uh, not something I want to invest the time in right now. But it's cool to have the seeds. So whenever I do intend to do it. Does anybody on the panel have any experience growing citrus? It seems to grow. That's one thing that grows really fucking well in San Diego. Everywhere I see, even like untended trees seem to produce killer large amounts of fruit and good quality stuff.
Yeah, Dr. Yu in the
Yeah.
chat mentions that citrus is not true to seed, and I just wanted to bring that up. I think you already knew that, though.
What, that it's grafted?
That's not true to seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point, because I don't know if that's the same case for finger limes. I'd imagine it probably is. And blood oranges, they're some of the lesser cultivated. It's not like your traditional oranges, which are cultivated at large scale commercially. I'm curious. I would need to look into the sources, backtracking where I got the fruit from.
Most orchards that are going to grow citrus are going to use I think it's a wild lemon that they use as the rootstock.
For like because it's very vigorous, I believe.
It has the best roots. Citrus can be grafted really easily. So like all of the citrus can be grafted onto each other. What I always wanted, I had a mature orange tree at a house I lived in for a while, and I almost did this, but then that tree became, the grafted trees have sort of a lifespan too, and they eventually sort of die. But they grow so you'll plant, if you're first starting an orchard, you'll plant this wild lemon. And then when the wild lemon trees get sort of established, you graft onto them the cultivar that you want for your orchard, and then you kill off the wild lemon. It's just the roots. And so just for that reason alone, like if you plant those seeds, you're not going to get that plant, those roots. It's a very similar thing in apples. If you take an apple seed, you'll just grow a crab apple, because in order to grow a real apple, you need it grafted onto a better root structure.
Yeah, normal apple trees take like sometimes like 10 to 20 years to produce good amounts of fruit, where the crab apple is just so much faster growing, and also I think as well disease resistant and drought resistant. That's the one that they graft off of. So I'll be interested to see what comes up when I pop those seeds from both the blood oranges and the finger limes. Somebody asked your favorite limonene strains, go, which will get us back onto the cannabis topic a little bit. I'll start off with a few of my personal favorites. One that I got introduced to first, I think it was called Slimer. It was a phenotype of Subcool's Chernobyl, and I've grown it myself since. Chernobyl is a very limey strain. It's super uplifting, heady, like really psychoactive, and extremely potent. Covered in resin, it gets that kind of taco on the leaf where there's so much resin that it sort of like folds in on itself. Beautiful plant. Beautiful smoke, heavy on the citrus for sure. As far as lime goes, that's probably one of my favorite citrus strains. I'm trying to think, there are a few orange ones. Tangy I didn't like as much because it wasn't super potent, but I grew one called Sour 76, which tasted like Tangy, but it had some Afghani in there. It was a little bit more potent. So those are probably two of my favorites. Does anybody else have favorite citrus or limonene strains that they're interested in? Probably
I
Black
grew
Lemon.
this Dr. Lemon I've talked about with you guys before that was just it was like eating one of those lemon candies. I mean, it was almost like too powerful on the lemon terps.
I've definitely seen that before too, and it's very interesting when you come across one that like it literally hits that flavor note so distinctly. And
yeah, I've just taken when I use that, I just take one little nug of it and I'll grind it up with a bunch of something else, and it still is like a lemon flavored bowl. But a little bit goes a long way.
I still pine for a cultivar that a local breeding group here, cultivation group, San Diego's Finest, they go by, cultivated. You call it Orange Tang. And it really did smell and taste, and I've talked about it before, kind of like the sort of the tang powder. It had a very it didn't remind me of lemons or limes. It much more reminded me of like oranges, kind of a sweeter sort sort of scent and flavor. And I was just blown away by how similar it was to that profile.
I would imagine.
But
Oh, sorry.
it no longer exists anymore. So
That's
it's just
always
one of
sad
those
when
things.
the one that got away, you get that flavor that you love and then it disappears. But I think when you go into the orange side, I think you're bringing in some of the terpene valencine, as in like Valencia oranges, and then also some other subtle things which are probably esters, which are not going to be found on any terpene wheel. Limonene is that base citrus note that comes with a lot of it, but citrus doesn't smell like candy, right? Or it doesn't smell like tang.
Mhm.
Tang has that like
Right.
sugary note. And there's almost something more to it. And so a lot of the times, like I'll do research with the grape one, like my Velvet Punch. Spartan has one that smells like grape candy. And to me, it didn't smell like, really grapes that I'd ever eaten. Because when I go to the supermarket, I see red grapes or green grapes. I don't see a lot of like purple grapes. And purple grapes, Concord grape, is what actually carries the artificial grape flavoring, which is known as methyl anthranilate. It's an ester. That's just one of the few that I found. There's also pineapple esters and a whole bunch of other shit that's found both in cannabis as well as the fruit itself, but they're used for these artificial flavoring. So when you figure like, oh, it's grape tang, and then like maybe you look into tang, like what they use to flavor the tang, and then find that commonality from the chemical side, that's something that I at least enjoy doing and sharing with the community. If you go on my page, I have a bunch of saved stories. I've done grape, pineapple. I don't know if I did blueberry yet. I did a cherry and a few others, but definitely a worthwhile endeavor for anybody that somebody said, do you need like I think a chemistry degree or something for that? And that was the comment that I was like, no, like this is stuff that you can find on Google Scholar, or like even Leafly is a good base. Like most of them are just going to tell you terpenes, how terpenes smell and how they might make most people feel. But then there's like a lot more to it. When the one thing that I think helped me find the actual specific names and smells was if you type in ester chart, ESTER. Ester is like an alcohol or something, and it's like like a flavor and aromatic. They're used in a lot of perfumes and things like that. But there's charts that will show like bananas, strawberries, peaches, apples, and all the shit. And then it'll list off all the esters that are found in certain ones. So you can go and Google like that word and then cannabis. If it pops up, you might be able to say like, oh, it was found in a lab report for an extraction or something. Or that's how I've ended up confirming with any of the ones that I have. So it's not like rocket science. It's definitely the information's at your fingertips. If you use Google with like a specific inquiry, you can definitely go down a path that informs you about some cool and interesting shit. Like methyl anthranilate, it's also used as a bird repellent. So my buddy who was growing in a greenhouse up in Del Norte, Doja DNA, maybe those seeds survived longer because they were able to repel the birds from getting eaten versus some of the other plants in the greenhouse that didn't produce as much or something. It's like little stuff like that is interesting to me, even if that wasn't exactly the case. Like knowing in the future it might, like Spartan's grape pheno would not be something that the birds would go after in my estimation. But that's really there's a lot to it. That's a deep rabbit hole, the cannabis chemistry. And another strain I was thinking of that had some of the orange terps that you were talking about, Matthew, was graciously gifted to me recently, some Mac Mosa. Give a shout out to Guy Smiley's Gardens for the messenger pigeon that he sent allegedly to make that happen. And it was a great sample and showed me, like I already knew, that the people in Michigan can grow some fire. So shout out to Michigan.
Yeah,
And
it tastes like an orange smoothie, that Mac Mosa.
I definitely
had
feel
eat-
like. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just say I definitely like the sweetness of that orange tang, mostly because it felt like it was so similar to like a thing that I already had a commonality with or a scent for. But I do tend to like more the stronger, intense lemon, limonene, like you were talking about, linalool, or not linalool, but just like those strong citric flavors and tastes, and also gas too. So I am more on that spectrum, the savory, gassy, citric.
that's California for you.
Yeah.
California, you gotta you learn to love the gas. And one that you mentioned that like you're gonna pass it to Tao next because I know you had something to say about Smiley sample there. But my most recent harvest was it was called Berry Lights, which is a mother of berries from Maine, a strain I'd never tried before, but it tastes like the blueberry sorbet Dippin' Dots. Like, I don't know if you guys ever eat Dippin' Dots, those really tiny little fucking ice cream pebbles or whatever, but it tasted exactly like that. And something unique about that strain for me was a lot of smoke smells kind of either like generic, just like cannabis smoke or like whatever. But like when I walk through, I'd like take a bong hit, blow it out, and like go fill up my water and like walk through that cloud. Even like 10 or 15 minutes later, it smelled like a sweet, like berry, like a candy factory. It was just like so rich and sweet and delicious in the smoke. So that was something interesting that I hadn't noted with a ton of other strains, but I'm curious if you guys ever notice. Girl Scout cookies is another one. Whenever I come home, the forum cut, my wife would be smoking on that. I always would say, "Damn, it smells so fucking good," and I wouldn't know like what it was. And I started asking whenever I'd have that thought. I go, "Are you smoking on Girl Scout cookies?" And she go, "Yeah." I'm like, like something about it. Like there's something. Maybe it's just the terpenes and everything else that's going up, but I've tended to notice that certain strains have more of that than others. I'm curious, Tao, do you have any thoughts on that? Have you noticed any?
Yeah, I forget exactly which ones, but definitely I like that quality in the smoke. Like after you leave and come back, it still smells really good. But I was gonna say on the orange and citrusy ones, I grew out at that Agent Orange a while back, and I'm growing one right now. That's in flower, and that stuff was ridiculously orange, but it was like not sweet. It was like
Burnt orange.
yeah, it like hurt when you smell, like it would hurt my eyes. Smelling the bag, opening the bag would hurt my eyes pretty much. That's how potent it was. Just ridiculous. And I hope it is like that again. But that's not my favorite at all. But other people like it, So
Those extract well oftentimes, and I'm all for like something that makes you have like a physical reaction when you open the jar or the bag and it like hits you and you're just like ooh, like, or it's like it like stings your nose or like just really grabs your attention like that. But I know we're coming up to that 5:40 hour out here on the West Coast, which is about 8:40 on the East Coast over there. Spartan Grown is going to be heading over to the Michigan Bros Grow Show. I want to ask you if you have thought of any strains that maybe have a distinct smelling smoke. I just thought of another one. It was Wonder Brett's Pink Picasso. My buddy who smokes it. He says whenever he's at it, back when events were happening, people would always ask like, "What are you smoking?" Whenever he'd light up joints of that. So Spartan, any thoughts on that? Interesting smelling smokes before you go, and then your final sign up.
I don't know. The ones I love is like, I love the Mac. I love the Mac One smell. That's the one that is just my medicine, I guess. As far as the lemony strains, I really enjoyed Vortex a lot. I've been smoking this concentrate, this rosin today, pancakes, and it's like it tastes like lemon pound cake is what it tastes like to me. It tastes like a really light, not really a pound cake, like even lighter. Like it just tastes really super light, and it's not a super strong lemon, but it's like that pleasant lemon that like cleans your palate. It's fucking nice. It's a good job on that. The old strain I had and lost it was a purple strain. Fuck, I'm too high to remember shit right now. Viper City OG. It was Viper City OG, and what was cool about that one was after about a month cure, it would smell like buttered popcorn, which is the only time I've ever had that with any cannabis. So that one stands out in my memory. And as far as lime goes, for that question, I smoked recently. Shout out to Doc Dankenstein. He grew some lime skunk. That was some good stuff. I really enjoyed that, and it was very lime. It was very heavy lime flavor, and then that's like just a skunky, not so much cheesy, but kind of more. I don't know, just a kind of funkiness in the background, I guess.
Have you tried Citrique from Red Setter Farm?
Yeah.
Is that limey?
Citrique is different. No, it's Citrique to me. They say it's limey, but to me, it's what I call that is like the chemically citrus, and that's what I don't like. I don't like the almost fuel, not quite, but it's like a chemical. And to me, it's not harsh, but it's almost like a harshness in the back of my throat that I get from those and tangies and things like that. The only orange strain the orange flavored strain that I really like was a concentrate that I had from Fergroli, and it was clementine. That was amazing. But I've recently smoked somebody grew some of the clementine flower, and I smoked that, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I did the concentrate. So I don't know. My palate's a little weird when it comes to the citrus stuff. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and
hit or miss for sure. Alrighty, peace out, Spartan.
Yeah, so I just want to say, check out my Instagram, guys. I'm trying to give away this light, but one of the requirements is I got to get a bunch of followers. So I got to get up to 6,000, and I think I'm like 200 and some change away. So if you can hook me up with some followers, and all you got to do is I even tagged everybody in the description of the post. All you got to do is click on them, follow them, and you're entered to win. And you can win that, what's it, 650R, I believe, or I don't know. It's in the post. Check it out.
It's a expensive light for sure. Those are definitely not cheap, and they're good quality. A lot of people are having great success with them, so definitely make sure you're following Spartan Grown. We got 119 here. If you're not already following him on Instagram, follow him on Instagram. If you have a backup account, go to that backup account and follow him from the backup account. Fucking get those numbers up. Get the community a good light. And
I just really want. I would really be happy to see somebody who watches one of the shows that I go on to win the light. That would make me super happy. So I mean, this light's better than, I have one light that might even compare to it. All the others are older versions of that, so that's better than most of the stuff I'm using. So it's a great light, and it would make me super happy to see one of the people I talk with in chat or somebody to win it, you know.
I hope that's the case, and I have a feeling it will be. And I want to say cheers to you for not lighting your beard on fire for another week over here, at least. Stay safe out there, Spartan Grown. I know you got another show to head over to, Michigan Bros Grow Show, starting up in about 15 minutes on the Michigan Bros Grow Show YouTube. And thank you again, as always, for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Love hanging out with you, and shout out to chat. Love you guys.
Peace out, Spartan.
That's at Spartan Grown on Instagram, and you can find his commercial grow at Mitten Canico. They are killing it over there. Big numbers, cannabinoids, and the people are saying the smells and terpenes are outrageous too. I don't know if they do terpene testing or not on their commercial product, but I'd imagine it's pretty good stuff. So always happy to have Spartan joining us. He's a great dude, and also appreciate the guys over at the Michigan Bros Grow Show. They're good guys over there as well. Have done a few shows with them myself, and have had only great experiences with them and their community. In fact, I know most of you in this community are going to be going over there after this show tonight. So cheers to all of you for being here with us and dedicating the 2 hours that you have, if you have been here the whole show, even if you've only been here for a part of the show. We appreciate all of you. Sour Diesel Tangi, you were with us last week. That was awesome. A much deserved moderator with the blue wrench in the chat. Major General 420 Army, Magnum Opus, Wardrobe Farming, Resurrection Prophet, Building Buds, Extract 58 Cool, Johnny Caniseed, and many more in the chat. All 119 of you, cheers so much for being with us tonight. We've got about 14 more minutes left, and I wanted to pass it back to Matthew Gates and see if you had any thoughts that you hadn't gotten out yet this week that maybe you wanted to share with us, or any kind of just random musings, rumblings, thoughts, comments, ideas generally.
I appreciate that. Well, I got to do one cool thing that happened today actually was that I was able to work on some of those like speculative fiction creatures, and I had read this really interesting research report that's called "Moth Wings Are Metamaterials," and it's very amazing. I just posted on Instagram if you're curious about that. And I just love using inspiration from like the world, but especially like the kind of stuff that we talk about the microbiome and viruses and all kinds of other cool stuff, venom. Um, and then like using that to create some like cool fantasy creatures for like my friend's game that he's going to publish. Like, I don't know, it's a bucket list item for me to be able to contribute to that kind of a sort of fictional world. And yeah, so I guess my musing is like, if you have a hobby or you have something that you want to do, like find a way to do it, man. Like, or whomever you are. There's a lot of options out there, and it's better to create than to maybe let it go by the wayside. I think a lot of people regret that if they don't create. At least that's what I feel.
I totally agree with that. That's a great sentiment. And curious, as you brought up Venom, it one reminded me of my first bong ever was named Venom, more after the Spider-Man character, like the black version of Spider-Man, because the bong was all black and it had like a kind of swirly pattern or whatever. But it was because it was like black and it hit hard as fuck, kind of like Venom, like the character in those movies. But what is your favorite venomous animal, or do you have any like in nature? I know you know so much about IPM in general, but just as somebody who's fascinated, I follow like the dark side of nature and a few other pages that sort of show the awesome power and destructiveness sometimes of animals and their potential. Do you have like a favorite, like maybe snake or spider or sort of interaction that involves venom in real life that maybe has drawn your interest to that?
Sort of, yeah. I think that like Some of the interesting, this is not quite venom per se, but like it's interesting when you see examples of like Komodo dragons and other organisms that have like a really microbially rich mouth, and like when they bite their prey, they can transmit a really noxious wound, and they get infected, and that's sort of an interesting symbiosis to see, that sort of mutualism that works like kind of like a more complex venom, because there might be tons of toxins going along and enzymes that might break things down. I recently created a creature that is basically that it's like a tailless whip scorpion. For those who don't know what that is, you can look that up. That's a nightmare fuel kind of creature. No venom in them, but I gave them that, and I just thought that that would be a really interesting thing to draw from, because they use these large, powerful, like praying mantis like claws. And if you give them like a really bad venom that would just kill you, like with necrotic venom that like dissolves your tissues, it's game over, man. So you got to make some powerful, lethal creatures, and then you can make some other things that are less challenging. Anyways.
I like that you're using your mind to, come up with ways to brilliantly destroy the human race, at least for a video game or entertainment. So very fascinating stuff, that is for sure. And interesting to think that in reality, I mean, everything sort of evolves, right? So it's not out of the realm of possibilities that those things could be possible in the future with mutations and things like that. So fascinating examples. I always enjoyed the Komodo dragon interaction, and I always worried if I ever saw one, if I was going to get bit, because I'd heard about that and how bad it can really be. So, I mean, it's functionally like a venom or a poison. If it's going to do that much, as much or worse damage to you than some of the actual venoms out there. I know we have like Black Widow, or is that what it is? Black Widow with the little red hourglass
Yeah,
ear?
that's a black widow. Other
Yeah,
widows have that too.
they're all over San Diego. And like from my understanding, they're not incredibly deadly to humans, but it might like kill your dog or something. But
Some people are more sensitive than others, but yeah, it's usually not a death sentence.
there was a
No,
go
I
ahead,
was
Doc.
just gonna say I'm amazed with those plants that can that have like I don't even know if it's poison. It might be just acid, and like when some of them can eat a rat, some plants,
Oh yeah, like
and you
pitcher
know
plants
just
and
bugs
stuff.
in general.
Some are
Yeah, pitcher
poisonous that can
plants
kill
Yeah.
and
us, like Datura. And some people smoke that shit. But it's weird. You can smoke it and like it won't fuck you up. But if you like touch it, or if you're around it or inhale it too much while it's like raw and growing, it can actually kill you.
There's
So
those plants that have
that's
like
wild. I didn't even know about that.
a super oh man, I'm forgetting the name. It's in Australia because of course. But like I think it's a grass, and it's got like really sharp needle-like structures. And basically, if you brush up against it, I think there's also a compound in it, and it feels like your whole leg is, or wherever it touched, is like on fire. And because of the nature of the needles, if you go to touch it, of course you spread it to the next limb that you touch it with, and pretty soon you want to die. Like it's terrible. That's the kind of adaptation. I'm surprised that something so effective hasn't been developed more often, but maybe there's a selection pressure against being that bad. Maybe things just go out and try to wipe you out at that point.
damn nature you scary remains a thought in my head sometimes. Some of the shit that it's capable of. Plants, and it's funny because that plant I talked about earlier, Datura, when I googled entheogen, which is like the new fancy term that people are saying instead of psychedelics, I guess it's the more like politically correct and scientific. It's like saying cannabis instead of pot or weed or something. So that people are trying to push that to make it more legitimate, which I am behind. I think that
Well, it's
there's
a
a lot of
class of
research.
things. I
Yeah,
think
and it is, but it's when you type that in, that's the first plant that they show, and it's like that kind of like bell hook type flower. It's an interesting looking one, but it just led me down a weird rabbit hole of like there's a page on Instagram of like poisonous plant cult or something like that, and there's just a bunch of interesting poisonous plants out there, and some people are really fascinated by that shit, just like some people are fascinated by hot peppers. I know you mentioned somebody grew habaneros earlier, and the habanero is the hottest pepper that I've personally eaten, the red habanero, and they're like 500,000 on the Scoville, and that shit is super hot, but they have stuff double and even triple that heat now, so it's fascinating to see where breeding has taken the hot pepper world.
think that like my fascination for like venoms and poisons, but also like it also is the same kind of reason why I might be interested in biosecurity and like cybersecurity and hacking. It's like things that deconstruct other things and then like just like maybe like in the abstract, it's like structure in general. And that maybe sounds a little pretentious now that I've said it, but
It's
I'm
okay.
sticking
Well,
to it.
I'll say this. You've got a lot of information that covers a lot of really interesting things, and I want to give people the opportunity who haven't already heard of you before or know who you are to find you, even though it's on the screen right now. If you're watching the YouTube video, this will soon be going to the podcast again because I have the login info. So I'm going to try and download this episode tonight and upload it to the podcast, and then work all the way back to the episode after Rob Smith came on. I think that was the last episode that's been on the podcast. I'll go back and double check it. But the former host who asked me not to use their name anymore, although much love and respect to them, they know who they are. And the people that have been around long enough know who they are. They gave me the ability to get logged in over on the Anchor. So it'll be a matter of me going through the YouTube, downloading the MP3 audio, and then uploading it to Anchor, which will distribute it to all the podcast platforms for those of you who like to listen after the fact. So shout out to the former host again for making this all possible and passing the reins on to myself. And shout out to everybody who's come. I want to give the final two guests their opportunity to give their shout outs. If Matthew, did you give yours? I'm a little bit stoned over here. Did you get your chance to give your locations yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, so go ahead. Sorry, rambling.
Yeah, it's no problem. So yeah, you can find a ton of, I think, but I'm biased, free, really helpful educational content about integrated pest management and sort of like, pest bionomics and their weaknesses, their strengths. You've already seen me and heard me if you've watched this episode talk about how interested I am in all these different traits. So you can tell that I am very detail oriented. My account Zenthanol on YouTube is where most of this content can be found, but I also post quite a bit on my Instagram account at SyncAngel, and you can also find me on Twitter at SyncAngel. And I really enjoyed the chat in this episode, and I look forward to seeing more of the same names they do every week.
You and me both. I always love seeing the same names in the chat and the new ones that are popping up occasionally. It's awesome to see. We're still growing a little bit every single week. We get new names here and there, and I'm always happy to see the crowd show up again for another week to hear us talk. And it's been a great time as always. I want to pass it next over to Dr. MJ.
Hey, yeah, it was a fun episode. I am Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. We publish articles, tutorials, and guides on the science and practice of growing cannabis. As I'm sure most of you who are listening to this have already heard me say, I enjoyed the show. I'm glad I got to be back and just kind of chill during a whole show and not have to like run out of here and feel all stressed and everything. So it was fun, and we got into some interesting topics. We are getting in towards the flip in the New Year's Grow Challenge, but if you want to hustle up and plant some seeds, you're still welcome to join us. And yeah, come visit us at Coco for Cannabis. I had a fun time, Jack. Thank you for hosting, Matt, Tao, everybody else that was on the panel, and everybody in the chat. You know, when we do a show like this, it's sort of really on the chat. So thank you to all of you for showing up and asking your questions.
Thank you as always for coming, Dr. MJ, and I agree totally. Thank you to the chat for showing up. And last, certainly not least, the American one.
Jack, thanks for hosting tonight, and thanks for showing up on the panel, everyone. Shout out to Shane. Shout out to Chad. I'm sorry I wasn't in chat more. I've been doing some stuff. And yeah, I'm the American one on YouTube and the American one _ Keens on the IG. And yeah, I'm glad to hang out, and it was a good, interesting show tonight. So peace out. Have a great one.
Thank you as always for joining us, the American one. I'm always happy to see you here, as well as in the many other chats that we regularly bump into each other on the YouTube and other communities. So thank you again for joining us. Always appreciate your time, and I really look forward to popping your Amy Aces seeds in my next grow. Seeing tons of great results from everybody else who's grown them so far, and I hope to do them justice and grow them the best I can. Definitely, if anybody wants to see that grow in the future, which you won't be seeing for a while because I don't post my actual live grows, but I post my past grows. You can follow me at Jack Greenstock. Right behind me there, I'd lean over. on Instagram and Cannabis primarily. I am also Jack_Greenstock on Twitter, where I talk more about other shit than cannabis. Sometimes I'll talk about stocks. Don't listen to me about stocks though. Just interesting shit. There's a ton of different information on all the different social media platforms, and I appreciate everybody who follows me on any of them, including this one, the Cheap Home Grow YouTube channel. It's a great network. I'm very thankful for everybody who shows up both on the panel and in the chat each week. Been amazed and thankful for all the support that you've given me and all the other panel members throughout the years. We're coming up on our 100th episode next week, so hopefully I'll come up with something special for everybody by next week. I have an idea that I might try and run into places. I've been holding this back for a while, but maybe doing like a cannabis Jeopardy, and I'd be your host. And I don't know if we can even call it cannabis Jeopardy because we might get sued or whatever. But having like little categories like name that strain, or like name that breeder, or veg basics, or like seedling info, or what little info like that. I think it'd be fun to do a little something different. And I don't know if that'll be episode 100 or sometime in the near future, depending on if I can get it figured out. But yeah, definitely look forward to some new and exciting things and a lot more of the same. And again, thank you to everybody who pre-ordered the book 50 Strains of Green. That is my first self-published paperback. It's printing currently. The books will be ready by next Friday. I picked them up personally in Irvine. My one buddy who's already got one, he got the pre-copy just to make sure that the quality was of, they call it your proof. And I didn't want to drive up to Irvine just for one copy. I wanted to drive up and pick up the whole entire thing. So shout out to Ali Noble for going way out of his way and getting that proof copy, and then video chatting me and flipping through and making sure the quality was up to par. It is. I'm very happy with it. I can't wait to pick up the rest of the copies, sign them, and ship them out to everybody who ordered. There's a few copies left. It was a limited print, so it will sell out. I'm not trying to like do scarcity kind of thing, but the ebook is coming soon. And after the ebook is ready, I'll have the audiobook, hopefully sometime in February. But again, thank you, everybody. I don't want to, I feel bad because I've taken your money and I haven't supplied you anything yet, keeping you all waiting. But it's coming. I promise it is coming. I've talked to the printer. They're putting it on the pandemic a little bit. And also their perfect binding machine went down, so they had to get a new part and fix their machine. And I'm kind of small potatoes. Like, their minimum order was like 50 books, and I only just barely doubled or almost tripled it. And they deal with people that print thousands and thousands of books. So they're like putting me on the back burner. Trust me, I called them every day from the 7th all the way up until they finally took my money and printed it. So thank you again, everybody, for your patience. I cannot wait to send those out and see people get them in their hands, because I think you will very much enjoy it. With that said, this is Jack Greenstock, rambling, and as always, jibba jabbering. That's why I get the slow burn zigzags. Signing out. Peace and love, everybody. Have a great one. See you next week.
Grow love.
Grow with love. And we are